And according to a new article in the Washington Post, the popular app TikTok may be censoring information about protests in Hong Kong. The app is owned by the Chinese company ByteDance. According to the Post, searching the app for the protests yields few results despite the presence of them on other sites. CNET senior producer Dan Patterson joins us now to talk about this. So TikTok, incredibly popular social media platform, particularly among younger people. It allows you to shoot sort of videos as short videos. So it seems like there's some censorship going on, because if you're in China and you go on TikTok, you can't find anything about the Hong Kong protests that continue.
Well, even here, a search for hashtag Hong Kong on mainstream apps like Twitter yields a cacophony of really interesting posts, not just about the protests. You can see Hong Kong in its most colorful, alive best, but you do the same search across TikTok, and a handful of posts turn up. Not just about the protests, but about Hong Kong as a whole.
Right. And I remember in talking about this story, and I think it might have been with you, we had talked about how Chinese government, it appears, have been regulating or controlling the narrative about these protests on other social media platforms. How is what's happening on other social media platforms different than what's happening on TikTok?
Well, what's happening on other social media platforms could be looked at as offensive. So they are being seeded with content that we might call influence campaign or propaganda type of content. What's happening on TikTok is a little different because TikTok's parent company, ByteDance, is Chinese. They have to adhere to the same censorship standards that China applies across other companies like WeChat and Baidu.
Has ByteDance responded to these allegations?
They have, Anne-Marie. They have said, hey, look, our app follows the same guidelines that other apps in the U.S. follow. We have a U.S.-led team that does content moderation based on U.S. cultural standards. But according to the Washington Post and our own phone calls, which were unreturned, we have no idea who those content moderators are, what their standards are, where they live, what they do, how they... So there's a lot of opacity when it comes to what they are filtering and how they are filtering it.
So in the past, we've talked about these apps that are owned by foreign companies, and there have been concerns about privacy. I remember when the Face app, when suddenly everyone learned that Face app was owned by a Russian company. Even though Face app had been around for a long time, that made people really concerned about privacy. Are they taking stuff off of our phone? So when it comes to apps like Face app or, TikTok, does TikTok have sort of the same level of concern, considering it's the Chinese government? And we know sometimes, they don't have the same boundaries as we do.
Yeah, let's put something in perspective here. Uber, an American company, was valued at the end of last year at $72 billion. TikTok's parent company, ByteDance, valued at $75 billion. That gives you a sense of the scale of what's happening here. So when we think about privacy and we think about security, we have to think also about capability. We know that these companies harvest vast amounts of data, and that $75 billion valuation gives you the resources to apply machine learning, artificial intelligence at very large scale. So we also know that these companies, particularly ByteDance, are really good at analyzing information like facial recognition data. So I don't want to say that a particular practice is happening, especially when we have such opacity here, but again, let's come back to the word capability or capacity. And that valuation tells us, well, they are certainly doing interesting things with your face data and artificial intelligence.
So TikTok is extremely popular outside of China. There are other Chinese apps. Why is TikTok so popular?
Well, TikTok has kind of hit the zeitgeist in ways that appeal to what we as Americans like to do. In fact, the NFL has signed a deal with TikTok. Look, memes and short form content are incredibly popular because they're easy to consume. TikTok hits that sweet spot.
I want to ask you about one more app that really got a lot of people's attention, Grindr, the dating app, also owned by a Chinese company, but they've negotiated with U.S. officials and they're selling that app.
Correct. They're selling the data involved with the app, and the app itself appears to be for sale. The particulars on that, though, I think any app that is owned by a cloud company, we should understand that your data is then hosted in the cloud no matter who owns the app.
Right, so they still have, I'm sure the original company probably still has the data. I don't
Correct.
know, unless that's part of the deal. Dan, thank you very much.
Good to see you.